Hello everybody, today we're going to take a look at prescription marijuana, prescription THC, and DUIs. What are the factors that can lead to someone getting a DUI while on prescription marijuana? How can they possibly avoid that? And what is the law in all 50 states? In all the states that have prescription marijuana, it tends to be a little bit different. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Joe the Lawyer. I'm your host, Joe Pometto, a practicing Pittsburgh, PA, criminal defense, family law, and injury attorney. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Also, sign up for my email list. You can sign up in the description below. When you sign up for the email list, you get a free PDF on what to do when pulled over by the police. You will also get weekly emails from me that includes updates on my videos, updates on my law firm, and also updates on great legal information. Now, before we dig into the content here, we're going to watch a little video from the local news in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're going to do the same time sip, and you know, in ancient cultures or in ancient times, sometimes what you would see after like a general or a barbarian won a battle, they would drink from the skulls of their enemies. I know, pretty crazy, huh? So today I am having a drink from the cup of one of my enemies because, you know, we usually get the best of them. I'm a Steelers fan. This right here, these are the Raiders. All right, everybody, cheers. Sip with me. It tastes better when we sip together. Cheers. All right, let's watch this video just to give you an idea of what goes on with these prescription marijuana laws.
Well, more than 500,000 Pennsylvanians have prescriptions for medical marijuana. But if you tell police you're a cannabis patient when they pull you over, you could end up getting charged with a DUI, even if you're not impaired. Williamsport is home to the Little League World Series. It's also where Jesse Rhodes found himself facing big legal troubles. 3 years ago, he was pulled over on this road at a DUI checkpoint. An officer asked him if he had any drugs.
I told him that I had no illegal drugs. I just had medical cannabis that was in the bed of my truck.
Police told him to pull into a parking lot where they took his medical marijuana from the back of his truck. Then they had him do a field sobriety test. In court, an officer testified that he passed the test. You showed no signs of impairment.
No, sir.
Yet they still charge you with DUI.
Yes. Yep.
Blood tests found Jesse had trace amounts of THC, the active ingredient in marijuana. Pennsylvania law says if you have any amount of marijuana in your system, even if you're a medical marijuana patient and you're not impaired, you can still be charged with DUI.
So a patient can be arrested, prosecuted, and convicted despite being 100% stone cold sober.
Pittsburgh attorney Patrick Nightingale is a medical marijuana patient and a legalization advocate. He says he takes cannabis before bed and the intoxicating effects have long worn off by the next morning. But there are still some chemicals associated with marijuana in his system.
I have my coffee, I drive to work, I go to court. However, I will have detectable carboxy in my blood, and that's enough for a DUI under current law.
They can get a DUI even if they have no problem driving their vehicle whatsoever.
Republican State Senator Camera Bartolotta has been trying to change the law. She says medical marijuana is the only prescription drug that can get you a DUI without evidence of impairment.
If an officer sees that you even have a prescription with you, you could get charged with a DUI? That's absurd. No one would think that that's okay.
After his arrest made the local paper, Jesse, a music teacher and fire inspector, had to explain not only the DUI, but his medical history.
I then had to go to my employers and reveal personal and private protected medical information and tell them that I was a medical cannabis user just to keep my job.
The district attorney ended up dropping the DUI charge, but Jesse still had to pay thousands of dollars in legal fees. Later, he testified in Harrisburg to change the law.
they should have to prove impairment. It's no different than any other controlled substance.
Allegheny County District Attorney Steven Zappala and other local prosecutors agree.
There's an inconsistency in the law as it's written now. I favor, as does the Executive Board, the DA's Association, we favor the particular piece of legislation you were referring to, because I think it'll clear some of the things up.
Jesse says changing the law would also help remove stereotypes associated with medical marijuana.
Not all medical cannabis patients are walking around like stoned out zombies.
Bartolotta's legislation had bipartisan support, but it still did not come up for a vote before the Senate adjourned last week. She says she plans to reintroduce the bill next year. Reporting live in Mount Washington, Paul Van Osdol, Pittsburgh's Action News 4.
Okay, so if you saw my last video, I went into the law about DUIs and prescription drugs. DUIs and prescription drugs. And in the video that you just watched, okay, the district attorney that we saw, Steven Zappala, Attorney Patrick Nightingale, who I know and is a friend of mine, and also Senator Camera Bartolotta, she's a state senator from Pennsylvania, they talked about a loophole. They talked about a loophole. What were they talking about when they characterized this as a loophole? Well, as I explained in my last video, for an alcohol DUI or a non-prescription drug DUI, any amount of a drug or that substance. Now, alcohol has a specific chart. So let's move alcohol over here. Let's move alcohol out of here because it's treated special. But let's talk about prescription drugs and non-prescription drugs. Any amount of certain prescription drugs in the blood system of a person who is driving can be considered DUI. Any amount. And what that means is that the government, when they bring that charge, they don't have to show that you were actually intoxicated. They don't have to show that the person was actually impaired or that the substance was actually damaging their ability to drive. All they need to show to prove that DUI, and this is for illegal drugs, non-prescription drugs, is that there was any amount of that drug in the person's system. This is the law for cocaine, heroin, MDMA, common party drugs. Now, for prescription drugs, you can still get a DUI. That was the topic of my last video. You can still get a DUI. However, you are not automatically considered DUI just because you were driving with a prescription drug in your system, in your bloodstream. The Commonwealth, the prosecution, the police have to prove one additional element, and that element is actual impairment. They have to show that you were actually intoxicated, actually impaired, actually not sober from the amount that was in your blood. Now, let's talk about how prescription marijuana is treated in Pennsylvania. Under the law, prescription marijuana is treated in Pennsylvania just like those illegal drugs. It's treated just like those illegal drugs. So the way the law was written is prescription marijuana, it lives between the two worlds, right? Because it's a prescription drug. So common sense would tell you it should be treated like other prescription drugs if the person is properly prescribed. And that the Commonwealth, to convict the person of the DUI, should have to show actual impairment. However, the way the law was written is that this particular prescription drug in Pennsylvania is still treated for purposes of a DUI like an illegal drug or one of the controlled substances such as heroin, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine. So prescription marijuana lives in two worlds. Now, the interesting thing about what those politicians and the attorney said is that they called this a loophole. Well, a loophole is usually a hole in the law. This is how I think of a loophole. A hole in the law that wasn't created on purpose. It's something that was created accidentally. However, my understanding is that the Pennsylvania legislature when they passed the medical marijuana law, which I don't know how long it's been now, maybe 5 years or so. When they passed that law, they purposely, my understanding is they purposely decided to still treat prescription marijuana like marijuana is a controlled or illegal substance. So they specifically wrote in that actual impairment did not need to be proven. Now, 5, 4, 6 years later, however long it's been, it's good to see the district attorneys coming around. It's good to see politicians pushing for this loophole to be removed so that medical marijuana can be treated like other prescription drugs. And people cannot easily get a DUI from driving on a drug that they've been prescribed for medical reasons. It's interesting to see the tide turn. But I can tell you, I'm almost positive, and actually from what I've heard and known in the legal community and the political community, is that the law was purposely written that way in Pennsylvania by the legislators. And the legislators, they were doing it because prescription marijuana was a tough pill to swallow in the first place. So sometimes, what's the saying? Nobody wants to see the sausage being made, right? So sometimes you have to give something to get something. And then further down the road, public opinion changes, political opinion changes, and steps can be made to close the loophole in the law. Though I'm not really sure it'd be proper to call it a loophole. But as it stands right now in Pennsylvania, prescription marijuana is treated just like an illegal or controlled substances for purposes of a DUI, even though it's prescription. And all police have to show is that there is a level of that drug, THC, a level of the substance that can potentially create impairment is inside the person's blood, and that they are driving the vehicle. That police don't have to show actual impairment, which is what they would have to do for all other prescription drugs. And that actual impairment element protects people from just getting a DUI, from taking prescription drugs and just getting a DUI. I mean, what percentage of the population is on prescription drugs? It's got to be close to half on a daily basis, 1/3. 1/3 of people out there driving, they're not unsafe. They're not unsafe drivers, okay? But they may be taking their properly prescribed prescription drugs. So let's scroll down. I found this page, which is pretty interesting. There's a chart. It's kind of small, and it tells us. Let me see if I can do this. It tells us, okay, the marijuana laws in the different states. So, state marijuana impaired driving laws. Zero tolerance law prohibits driving with any amount of THC and or its metabolites in the body, regardless of whether or not that drug is prescribed. And we're looking at the great state of Pennsylvania, Delaware, Rhode Island, Michigan, Indiana, Georgia, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, Utah, Arizona, Oklahoma. It's an interesting cross-section of states there. A couple in the Northeast, a bunch in the Midwest, only one in the South, and a couple out West. So it doesn't fall neatly along the political lines that you may think it would. And that probably has more to do because these laws are regulated state by state. So it has more to do with the local politics within the state than perhaps how a state would vote nationally. Per se law prohibits driving with a detectable amount of THC in the body that exceeds the legal limit. Zero tolerance is blue. The per se law is orange. Ohio, Illinois, Montana, Washington, and Nevada. So these are the states that try to actually detect the amount of marijuana in the person's blood and then go on the basis of that. So they treat marijuana like alcohol, which has different levels. Then you have under the influence, DUID, requires the driver to be under the influence of or affected by THC. And this is all the gray states. So all these gray states require the actual impairment element. All these other gray states. And you can see, again, here, the Midwest, Northeastern, Western, the western states, these southern states, etc. Very interesting. And then permissible inference law applies if THC is identified in a driver's blood in quantities of 5 nanograms/milliliters or higher. If so, it is permissible to assume that the driver was under the influence. That's an interesting law. I'd have to read a little bit more about that to break that down. And that's Colorado, which was the first one to legalize completely marijuana for leisure use outside of a prescription drug. So it's fairly interesting. I don't know if this article, let me see this sentence right here. While in 2013, 2014, 8.3% a weekend positive over-the-counter prescription. I don't know. See that these laws here, that what we're seeing here, it tells us if the law is a little bit different for those that are prescribed the marijuana. But what I'm assuming from this chart is that that these blue states are similar to Pennsylvania, which means a zero tolerance law, whether the drug is prescribed or not prescribed. However, some of these states may make a distinction between the illegal marijuana in the system and the prescription marijuana in the system. Now, this article here coming out November 1st, 2022, just about 2 months ago. So this is when we started to see, the law sort of change. Let me see here. Pennsylvania prescription marijuana law passed. Let's see what year it was passed in. Just a couple of years, actually. Medical marijuana, April 6, 2016, and then it became available in 2018. So the law passed 6 years ago, and it's been available for 4 years. And again, like I said, I'm pretty sure that when it was passed, it was specifically written to allow to make sure that marijuana, even though it was prescribed, was still treated like other DUIs. And I imagine that this was done in order to get more conservative, more old school, not necessarily Republican, because there's a lot of libertarian Republicans, but old school, conservative style politicians to sign off on this. And again, sometimes you don't want to see how the sausage is made. You just want to taste it after it's prepared. So be aware, in certain states, and certainly in Pennsylvania, normally a prescription drug, if you're driving with it in your system, just the presence of the substance in your system does not cause you to be DUI. However, if you are also impaired by that drug because you took too much of it or you took it incorrectly, you could still get a DUI for a prescription drug. Now, in Pennsylvania, marijuana, prescription marijuana, doesn't fall into that category. It's treated like other illegal controlled substances such as heroin, fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and any presence of it, whether it's prescription or not, in your system makes you automatically guilty. It's a zero tolerance or it's a per se violation. So I hope now you have a better understanding of some of the risks that come with the prescription marijuana and still driving with it in Pennsylvania and many other states that still treat it like an illegal drug for purposes of the DUI. Perhaps this is something that you want to become vocal on. I do agree with the politicians that we saw and the attorney that we saw, Mr. Nightingale, was a good friend of mine. I think that the impairment should have to be proven because it just doesn't feel right to jam people up for a drug that they're prescribed. Now, if the police can show actual impairment, then and the prescription marijuana in their system, then the DUI laws should be written that way and the person can still be prosecuted. But if they're not impaired, if they pass all the field sobriety tests, if there aren't other signs of impairment, they shouldn't be at risk of getting a DUI. As we saw from that video, just being charged with a DUI can ruin someone's life. So thank you for tuning in to Joe Pometto, Joe the Lawyer. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. On this channel, I cover legal news. I'm also focusing more on legal education, breaking down legal topics for the general public. Please sign up for my email list, like, and subscribe. All right, everybody, have a great day. Thank you very much, and drink from the cups of your enemies. Cheers.